For today, I wanted to review the movie Neighbors. No, not the Seth Rogen one, the one with Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi from 1981. I'm a big fan of both John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. I think they're great, respectively, and combined, they've made some great movies that I hope to talk about on my channel at a later time. But for now, just because I watched it recently, or just because I feel this one needs a little bit more exposure, and I hope if I can reach just one person who will maybe see it, maybe I've done a good job. Yeah, I wanted to talk about this one. And this is pretty much almost like a perfect Netflix kind of movie, because I remember this is such a vague, weird memory, but I used to have this little movie guide book. It was it was a huge book actually. It had little, I don't know who wrote it or anything like that, but I got it from the video store, Rogers Video in Canada, and had little tiny reviews and little star ratings and stuff like that. And I remember the 0 star or the no star or whatever review was a turkey. So if the movie got the worst possible rating, it was a turkey. And of course, I guess you can see where this is going. Neighbors had a brief description, gave it a turkey. And so I wondered, what could be so bad about this movie? John Belushi, hilarious. Animal House, Blues Brothers, Saturday Night Live. Dan Aykroyd, hilarious. Blues Brothers, Saturday Night Live. A million other movies that he's great in. So what could be so bad about this movie? And it didn't really give too much insight, but I could never find the movie anywhere because it was kind of, at least for a time, obscure. But first time I ever got Netflix, this is one of the first movies I decided to watch because it was on Netflix. I was like, yes, I finally get to see this movie. And it is a bizarre movie. But, I would say I liked it enough that I now have the DVD. This was released by Mill Creek, I believe. Just recently, actually. Just a few months ago. So kind of shows how far this movie's gone. So maybe it's slowly but surely developing maybe a little bit of a following, which I hope is the case, because I think this is not a turkey. I think this is a very worthwhile movie, and I'd very much recommend giving it a watch. Summarize it briefly. It's what's kind of appealing about this movie actually is that it's John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, but they're totally playing against part. So they kind of switch their known personas from films. So Dan Aykroyd plays this really wild, off the cuff kind of character, while meanwhile John Belushi plays this very reserved, very kind of dorky character. So I've never seen Belushi like that before. So that in and of itself is interesting. And Belushi and his wife, they're living almost in the middle of nowhere, except for one house that's beside them, and who moves in. But Dan Aykroyd and his wife, played by Kathy Moriarty from Raging Bull, and they're just insane. Dan Aykroyd is just this kind of really staggeringly kind of straightforward, but you can't really trust him because he's really eccentric, really weird, and he's is he trying to rip me off and steal my car, take my money? What's going on here? And Kathy Moriarty is she's this film noir dame kind of, and she's trying to seduce John Belushi. So what's I think so funny about it, even though, to be perfectly honest, it's not a laugh out loud guffaw kind of comedy, in a kind of a quirky, weird, oddity kind of way. It does kind of deal with these social norms and how to work within them, because you just see this character, the John Belushi character, squirming so much to try to be respond to these things in a socially acceptable kind of way, be a kind of polite person, and not go kind of off the wall. And throughout the film, he does kind of get driven off the wall. So it's this is one of those movies where there's so many misunderstandings, so many bad things are happening to the main character. It's watching an ant in a jar. You just see it struggling, and you're oh God, no. So I think that might turn some people off. But again, while it does not have completely laugh out loud moments, it's a very, almost like a surreal kind of black comedy, and even the music in the movie, it kind of works with it in a really weird kind of way. It has Twilight Zone kind of music, and you think the music is responding to what's going on in the scenes at each time. So it has a life of its own, which I think is really interesting. Um, the director is John G. Avildsen, who directed Rocky of all things. So I mean, it's interesting to see this kind of a comedy and this kind of a switch of their personas. And I think ultimately what it drives towards is interesting. Like, this is early 80s kind of movie. It's kind of like a kind of knock at suburbia consumerism. Like, there is this very specific kind of generation that kind of grew up in like the 60s, 70s, and meanwhile they find themselves in the 80s, consumerists living in a comfortable house in suburbia. And what happened basically, the Moriarty and Aykroyd characters apparently didn't get that memo. They're still off living like maniacs, and there's something that draws the Belushi character towards that. So I think it does have this very subtle kind of commentary to it about the social norms, about how to act within these situations, and ultimately about sort of abandoning that consumerism, sort of. I mean, it's not like a very provocative kind of message to it, but it's interesting. It's dark and it's quirky, and I think it's worth watching. I would rate Neighbors 3 stars out of 4. While it's not laugh out loud hilarious, it's an intriguing premise, and the two leads in Aykroyd and Belushi are irresistible to watch. So I think it's really worth seeing. It's probably on Netflix still. If not, Mill Creek, they did put out this DVD, so I definitely recommend checking this out too. Just an odd movie. If you like kind of the odder, kind of fair, the dark black comedies, definitely give this a watch. Especially, I mean, if you're a fan of Aykroyd or Belushi or both, I mean, how can you pass up seeing it? I think you should at least see it at least once, if you're a fan of either of them, to be honest. So that's my review for today of Neighbors. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. Comment what you think of Neighbors. Is it kind of underrated, kind of a hidden gem, or is it a turkey? And if you haven't already, please subscribe. That'd be awesome. Until next time, I'll see you later.